Welcome to Podium Perspectives from the Ictus Institute. I'm Dr. Robert Bigley, and today I'm joined by Delta David Gier. Maestro Geir spent 15 seasons as an assistant conductor with the New York Philharmonic and has been at the helm of the South Dakota Symphony Orchestra for over 2 decades. In this conversation, he offers insights into shaping orchestral sound in rehearsal and performance, and into the leadership styles of some of the legendary conductors he studied with, including Leonard Bernstein and Seiji Ozawa. Let's jump right in. When you step on the podium, what do you believe your job, specifically in South Dakota, what do you believe your job is when you step on the podium?
It doesn't matter where I am. Uh, it's really we're in service of the composer. A larger picture, we're in service of the art form. I mean, we're stewards of an incredible art form that's hundreds of years old, and we hope to steward it well and to pass it on to the next generation as good or better than we found it. Um, More and more challenging, to be sure, all the time. But
In what way? What do you? I mean,
well,
I
I
agree with
think
you, but what do you think?
I think during my entire lifetime, what passes for music education is has diminished. Funding for programs, of course, but also the content. Like moving towards marching bands and show choirs and things. And to me, the educators are on the front lines of, can you actually instill in your students a love for great music,
Yeah.
or is it just about keeping your program going and doing stuff that kids are easily interested in? So, and I've seen really good examples, even here in Sioux Falls. Just really dedicated teachers who are really really into that, and we see it in our orchestra because these kids come to concerts and they're engaged in the repertoire and really interested in what we're doing. Um, so that's the challenge that I see. I controversially, I will say that we live in an artistically illiterate society,
Yeah. Yeah.
and not just musically, but we're just not taught how to listen, how to look, how to read, and the belief in the for lack of a better term, the greatness of a tradition, literary tradition, that enriches people's souls, that brings us to a higher calling. That is not alive and well, as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's got it. It has to start there, as far as I'm concerned. It has to as a core belief that this is an important thing to do, not for its own sake, but for everyone's sake. We um, the people, like the composers that we revere the most, they believe that they were participating in something much bigger than themselves.
Hmm.
Even some of it's spiritual, and some of them it's just simply this larger humanistic kind of project that prevailed all the way at least up to the First World War, um, where writing of music and performing of music was something that could lift a whole society up and make
Yeah.
us better people. So I'm still a believer, obviously, and that's what I bring with me to the podium. Yeah.
Yeah. That's yeah. I mean, I think you've hit the nail right on the head, and it makes me think about in your bio. You started as an assistant conductor of the New York Philharmonic, or early in your
Mhm.
career. I'm not sure if that's where you started, but
Right.
and did you conduct the young people's concerts for that?
I did. Yes, I did. Yeah.
Okay, so tell me, how did that inform you? And beyond that, I'm using it as basically as a transition. So inform you as like your responsibility as a conductor to further the almost the doctrine of beauty, right, through the music. But then also, how did it inform you as an assistant conductor for like 15 years? Is that right? 15 seasons
Yeah,
then?
no, yeah, I would say over the course of 15 years. It wasn't like a full-time job the whole
Okay,
time, but yes, I worked with them over that course of 15 years.
which is a pretty long time.
Yeah.
in that
Yeah.
position. So if you wouldn't mind just sort of helping me transition from that idea of the young people's concerts and also your responsibilities at the New York Phil, and then how that set you up to be a music director later.
Oh, that's really interesting. Well, I mean, obviously, I was really fortunate I thanked God every day that I was able to go to work at Lincoln Center. It's such a
I
privilege.
can't even
Uh,
imagine.
it didn't, it, it, it paid squat. My wife used to call it my volunteer work at the New York Philharmonic. But like I was hired by Kurt Mazur. I worked with Lauren Mazel, and all these wonderful guest conductors and artists for so many years. That was obviously very, very formative
Yeah.
for me, and to be able to not just survive but thrive standing in front of the New York Philharmonic, which is not an easy task. Um, Also, and working together with a team, talking about those young people's concerts, everything was scripted by committee.
Hmm.
Even when Leonard Bernstein did them, he looked so natural just up there pontificating, but
Right.
but the fact is every single one of those was scripted by committee.
Interesting.
So yeah, and when we had a script writer who was a Broadway playwright.
Huh.
It was, the artistic administrator was in there, the education director. Like, we had quite a team
Wow.
working there, putting those programs together. The advantage, of course, with young people's concerts at the New York Philharmonic is that you have families buying tickets. It's
Okay.
not like a school concert,
I see.
and
I
there's,
see.
these kids are listening to this music at home, and
Right. It's the parents' idea
it's
to take him to the
yeah,
concert, and
and it was always that way.
it's not an
You look
assembly.
look at those old Bernstein films, and you'll see all these kids dressed up sitting next to their parents in the audience.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's one thing, but so working in a school context and educational context is quite different. Um, and talking about attention spans and all
Sure.
of that sort of stuff that we're dealing with, I find that we often sell kids short
Hmm.
in terms of what they're able to by trying to anticipate what they're going to like,
Right.
versus
Right.
what we actually have to offer. That we can do it in a passionately engaging way, and great music will do its thing. But that's getting a little off topic. I would say,
Well, if I
you
if I
know,
could say, I can remember being an elementary school kid. I grew up in the Tampa Bay area,
Mhm.
and one of the professional orchestras from Florida came and did an assembly, and I remember the conductor talking about what to listen for, and I still to this day don't remember what it was. Maybe you can help me figure out what it was. He's talking about picturing these Roman soldiers marching through town, and the brass announcing their entrance, and is that Pines of Rome? Is it what
Yeah,
is that?
that's what's in my head. Yeah,
Okay, all right.
absolutely.
Well,
Yeah.
it's funny because Pines of Rome blew my mind later when I was at Eastman. I heard their RPO play that in the
Mm.
surround sound thing. But anyway,
Yeah.
as a kid, I just remember it turned my brain on to listening to music differently. And I can point back to that when I was 8 years old. Just like I said, just turning my brain on and to hear things differently, which obviously has
Mhm.
served me my whole life.
Yep.
So okay, so you were talking about so when you take your orchestra, do you take them into schools, or do the schools come to you, or how does that work?
We generally have them coming to us. We play three concerts in a row on what we call bus day, and we fill the hall. We play for somewhere around 5,000 kids in a day.
Wow.
Yeah, and I have to say it has changed. I mean, I've been with the South Dakota Symphony for over 20 years now, and when I first came, I brought some of those New York Philharmonic programs with me, and they were just really great programs, and the kids were really engaged.
Hmm.
You know, they loved it, and the with the advent of the cell phone, basically, it's 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 not just the kids, honestly. It's the teachers. My wife actually said that she's noticed, teachers on their cell phones during a young people's concerts, sitting with their kids. It's like,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. What am I supposed to do with that?
I
You know,
know.
it's like
Gosh.
it's a little crazy, but you kind of wonder, with the teachers, did anybody actually teach them how to listen
Right.
well?
Right.
And are they stewarding their responsibility to teach these kids how to listen, or are they just playing the recorder, or trying to get them to sign up, next year to play the violin or whatever?
Yeah.
It's, I mean, I understand the pressure to get students and to maintain programs, but again, it goes down to that core belief of what it is that we're actually trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
Are we just trying to perpetuate programs, or are we actually, seeking to to make people's lives richer, you know?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And how does the symphony not end up just being a museum for works that people, I hate to say, don't care
Well,
about, you know?
but Rob, like, you get people in the concert hall and the music does its work.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just fantastic. I mean, we just did Strauss's Metamorphosen
Mhm.
last weekend, and that's a big chunk of change, late Strauss, heavily chromatic, but played by you know this orchestra of string players that are just so passionately engaged. And, people just blown away by
Hmm.
the sheer beauty and pathos of the music. So, it does its own work, I
Yeah.
think.
Okay, well, I'd like to, since you brought up the strings, I'd like to get a little bit into the woods, since this is
Yeah.
primarily going to be conductors watching this. I got to hear you rehearse the Lancaster Symphony Orchestra, and I went back to look and see what the piece was. It was on your program. It was the romantic work on your program. Do you remember what it was?
Yes, it was Rachmaninoff's Second Symphony.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And you got a sound out of those strings that I've never heard before. This lush sound out of those strings. And on behalf of me and all the other people that conduct orchestras, what did you do? What did you say? Was it a gesture? Was it what was there something in your toolbox that you pulled out? Because I know you're a trumpet player by trade, right? Me,
Guilty
me
as
too, by the way. I
charged.
was a high school trumpet player. So what
Yeah.
did you do to get that sound out of that string section? Do you remember?
Yeah, well, first of all, I programmed Rachmaninoff, so that helps. Let's just let it be said that you know, but it has to do with like requesting and then being rather insistent on the sostenuto,
Mhm.
because a lot of times string players, once they play the down bow, the sound will deteriorate. It takes a lot more energy to keep that long line going. So and you can say it once, but then and you can use it in your gesture, but at the same time it's something that needs to be insisted on more than once. And the other thing has to do with breath. I mean, string players don't breathe to play their instruments, but if you can get them to breathe,
Hmm.
and to imagine the vocalization of the lines that they're playing, then that brings a whole other quality to the sound that they're producing.
Yeah. Do you sing for the orchestra? Like, do you sing how you want a line to be played?
Occasionally, I mean, nobody really wants to hear me sing, so but we all know what we're after, especially when you get to that professional level. So yes, it's but I guess I find myself singing more for specific articulations
Okay, yeah, that
that
makes
I'm
sense.
after, lengths of notes,
Right.
stylistically in Mozart, for example, or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. I'm going to incorporate some questions from the Ictus Institute
Sure.
members. And so, since we're on this, there's a string teacher who's conducting high school orchestra. and be the great person to ask this of. She says, "How can I better reach my wind, brass, and percussion students during rehearsal?" So she's a trained violinist,
Mhm.
and she's a high school orchestra conductor. She says, "What's in your toolbox of analogies, phrases, tips, etc.?" This is a pretty broad question, but is there
Yeah,
anything that comes to mind for you?
yeah, sure. So I don't teach conducting. I mean, occasionally I'll sit down with someone and even a an instrumentalist that wants to start conducting, and one of the things that I do emphasize with them is that people play what you prepare, not what you conduct.
Tell me about that.
So, well, everything is contained in the upbeat. All the information, because once you hit the beat itself, it's too late.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
sound's already being produced. So you have to imagine what it is to actually produce the sound on the instrument.
okay,
So, so you have to, imagine what it is to be a wind player and take the breath and actually tongue the entrance. Likewise with brass players, and you can ask for different articulations. Is it more of a T? Is it a hard articulation? Is it more of a D? Is it a softer articulation? I mean, you can get away on a soft string piece with just that, and they can just sort of evaporate into the sound,
yeah, yeah,
but you try that with the percussion section, and it's kind of predictable what happens. So imagining what it is to lift that stick and actually place it, and what kind of articulation. It's all in that ictus, it's all in that
yeah.
upbeat. And
Right,
as you're
right.
going, the preparation that you give for that entrance of the brass section needs to include the breath, and you have to breathe with them, you have to articulate with them in your mind, and there's that sort of kinetic connection that happens
Yeah,
when that's actually happening within you, that they are able to respond to. That's what I
yeah.
got.
I'm glad. I'm always surprised when when conducting students are surprised about the breath. Like even though the instrument doesn't use the breath to play the instrument necessarily, like a percussion or strings or what have you, you have to breathe to bring
Yeah,
them in. To
yes,
yeah, yeah.
that's right, that's right.
That's excellent. Yeah. She also asked, how do you see the role of conductors and the rehearsal? Okay, so this might be too deep in the woods for education, but she's talking about um, she feels like her rehearsals are being cut short. This actually goes to what you're talking about at the beginning, that there's less of an emphasis on music education in the schools. Her rehearsals are getting cut short. The students have their obligations. There's class scheduling issues. What's some encouragement you can give to a high school orchestra director who's dealing with all of these issues?
Yeah, yeah, without knowing specifics, it's a little difficult to answer, but um I mean, staying core to mission
Hmm.
is really important, not just for your students, but also for your administration. Like when you find yourself facing the cuts, or, cutting down rehearsal time or something, like you need a really good reason to to be able to fight against that wave, that tide of funding cuts, and that has to do with why we do what we do. Has to do with what the benefit to the student is beyond just the technical ability to press and play, for the your keys on a woodwind instrument, or on the fingerboard of a string instrument. It needs to go beyond the simple perpetuation of a program. And sometimes I think we have to be evangelists.
Hmm.
I suppose it's not so different from in a professional orchestra, from interfacing with a board, for example,
Yeah,
or
right.
or even in administration. I mean, I've worked with administrations that were not actually music lovers,
Hmm.
which is confusing to me. Like, why would you give your life to this, if you don't love the art form? But but really, it needs to go deeper than the surface of what the problem that you're needing to solve.
Mm.
It's the benefit to the student, the benefit to the audience. Why do you want to program this work? Or and you better know why. You better know within yourself,
Right.
what that is.
Yeah.
And
That's
that's
great. Do you find she has another question about keeping students' attention, but I was wondering, do you find in the professional world are when you're have you had to change the pace of your rehearsals because we as a society our attention spans are getting shorter?
no,
Okay.
no, I haven't. I mean,
I definitely noticed it in the college world. Like I had to keep it was teaching college now was more like teaching middle school 20 years ago, where you just
uh,
had to keep moving things along and
yeah,
changing pieces mid.
I'm going to take that when I'm going to Roberts Wesleyan University in a couple of weeks
Yeah.
to speak, but they also asked me to rehearse their orchestra. So now my radar's up to see,
We'll
like,
check back in.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, honestly, most of the time when I work with students, it's conservatory students, and they're pretty darn engaged. Sometimes I'll find some students that are not emotionally engaged. It's not about their attention span. It's more about their affinity for the music. I'll give you an example. So when I came here to the South Dakota Symphony, I was also up for the Yale Philharmonia job.
Okay.
And I pulled out of that race because I really wanted a professional orchestra, and I didn't want to be in academia. But I'd worked at Yale quite a bit. And I got frustrated at one rehearsal because of this. I mean, I was pouring myself out on the podium, and I forget, I think it was Tchaikovsky. I don't remember exactly what the piece was. And I was having a hard time getting this kind of emotional engagement going. And a friend of mine was a percussion professor there at Yale, and we were talking afterwards. He says, David, what you got to realize is that these kids are not the same students that you and I were.
Mm.
So when you and I were in conservatory, we hung on that latest recording of Brahms too. We would stay up late at night, listening to this. I mean, this was life. He
Yeah.
said, these kids are listening to Nine Inch Nails, man. Like they're just not. Again, it goes back to the love of the art form.
Right.
And maybe you've got a tiger mom that made you practice, forever so you can become very proficient. But, if the love of the music itself has not been instilled in you, then, I have actually said, got in trouble for saying, like, to students, like, you could, with the discipline that you've instilled within yourself to get to this level, like if you applied it to any other profession, you could make a lot of money. So don't go out there and win an orchestra job and take up a chair for somebody who actually loves the music can be there, Like
Oh
go
gosh.
make a bunch of money as a surgeon. I don't know.
Hey, does your approach when you're guest conducting that the first rehearsal of the week, is your approach different than when you're working with your own orchestra?
It's people often ask me if I get nervous. And actually the only time I really get nervous is that first rehearsal with a new orchestra.
Yeah.
And it's just like a butterfly in the stomach kind of thing. Like, as you first of all, as a guest conductor, you don't know what the strengths and the weaknesses of the orchestra are.
Right.
So you have to evaluate immediately what that is. And I love that challenge, actually. I love, even when there are weaker spots in the orchestra, it's like, well, how can I get the most out of these people?
Yeah.
And how can I make sure that their experience of playing this piece is the best that they could possibly have? So, um, so I guess that's it,
Yeah.
just having to evaluate quickly on the spot. I mean, let it be said though, as a conductor, like at any given moment on the podium, it's kind of a balancing act of what what to address. Like what can be fixed
Right.
now?
Right.
What's going to be better on its own? And I don't really need to stop and rehearse it now because the next time we go through it, it's going to be better.
Yeah.
Which is often the case with a professional group. They don't need to hear you pontificate about something.
Right.
They just oftentimes just need to play it again.
Yeah.
Or you know, sometimes it's a matter of this is simply not going to get better. And if I keep beating this horse, then I'm actually bringing people down and making it less possible for them to play their best, whatever their best may be. And also, considering the morale of the group, like, you're beating up on their colleagues, and
Right.
that's generally not a good idea.
Yeah. And they all know. They know what's been going on in that section for forever.
Well, and conversely, sometimes they like to see a guest conductor sit on that person. It's, I mean,
Yeah.
I conducted the National Symphony Orchestra of Costa Rica several times, and there was a principal cellist down there, and this guy was a pistol, man. He put me through my paces every time. He's a smart aleck, on the
Yeah.
podium.
Yeah.
And I would just like fire right back at him, and give it right back to him. And the players in the orchestra were smiling, like, finally, somebody's putting this guy in his place.
Somebody's not afraid of him.
Just stop being obnoxious, dude.
That's a great segue to another question I wanted to ask. You've conducted a lot of American music. You've premiered a lot of music,
Mhm.
and I want to come back to the premiere thing. But tell me about when you're conducting American pieces for audiences in other countries. What's the response been?
Um,
Do you? And let me ask you this in this way: like when I've guest conducted overseas, and we've done an American piece side by side with something from that country, like if I was in
mhm.
Austria or whatever, we did some Haydn. Um, I always feel like I need to prove that this American composer is as good as their composer was,
Mm.
and and I think that might have been a mistake. So that's why I'm asking you, what are your thoughts on that when you because I think you almost always do bring an American piece with you, right? When you're guest conducting overseas.
Generally, well, that's what they want.
Yeah,
Like when we hire a Russian guest conductor, we want him to do Russian music, right?
absolutely, a hundred
So,
percent.
that's the case. Um, so generally the response is good. I mean, the first thing is to make sure you pick good American music. That's like don't now's not the time to do, a mediocre composer buddy a favor. Like this is you know, you want to put your best foot forward.
Yeah.
But
And
so I
so
mean,
for you, who is that? Who's the go-to for the American composers that you're gonna? Is it the ones that is it
oh
the Bernstein, the Copelands, and
well, I mean, oftentimes that's what people want.
yeah, yeah,
But if I have a choice, I'll take John Corigliano, for
yeah,
example. Yeah, John Luther Adams. Yeah, I mean, there's some, real top shelf folks out there. I think maybe the most interesting uh, guest conducting thing from an American rep perspective was the one time I conducted in China,
yeah.
two different orchestras, same program. They chose the program. I wasn't allowed to choose any uh, any living composers. So, and it was like the Barber Violin Concerto, it was Appalachian Spring, the Barber Adagio, I forget what else. Oh, Bernstein Candide.
Oh yeah,
Oh, yeah, sure. So, a fun program, but it was a kind of the best example of why you would hire a guest conductor.
Hmm.
So here I go, I'm in Qingdao, and I have like 10 rehearsals,
Wow.
and it's like, but it's a government job, right? So there are two rehearsals a day. And I'm looking at this program, I'm thinking I'm going to be letting these people go early, like all the time,
Yeah.
canceling rehearsals. And I was told right up front, they have to stay in rehearsal for every rehearsal every time. I was not allowed. So I'm like, okay. So I go in, and there was there was absolutely no syntax in terms of their musical language. Like, in terms of style of playing American music. An example is the kind of, Latin rhythm in the coda of the Candide Overture, and I mentioned the Caribbean to them, and it was like, you know, it was like, Latin rhythms, all of this, like no context whatsoever. And so we had to work really hard. That's the Scottish snap in the Barber violin concerto, da 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 dee, da 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 da, you know, like it was came out da 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 every single time.
Oh,
So, really had to, like, I danced around. You asked me if I sang to the orchestra, like I did a lot of singing that week, you know, and by the end of the week, like they were really getting it and they were so proud of themselves for
mm,
getting it. They really loved it.
yeah.
So let's do the flip side of that. A few months later, I'm conducting a Chinese composer with the Thailand Philharmonic.
Okay.
And Ye Xiaogong is his name. And he was supposed to come, but he had to cancel at the last minute. The concertmaster and I, who was Greek, were trying to figure out how to phrase this melody
Hmm.
in the second movement. It's a long, beautiful Chinese melody, and for the life of us, we couldn't figure out how to phrase it. I mean,
Yeah.
there
Wow.
was no natural, it was a lot of slurs, but they were like going over the course of like 4.5 bars. It's like, golly, where does this melody go? And we just didn't know. So,
What was your solution? You just
that
did
was
your best?
humbling. Yeah, well, yeah, we did our best. We
Huh.
we kind of
Huh.
figured it out, and we did it our way, and hope we got close.
Do you feel like there's a level of responsibility as being the music director of an orchestra to commission works?
Mhm. I always think that we do have a responsibility to participate in the future of the art form.
Yeah.
Um, when I first came to the South Dakota Symphony, I introduced this audience, this orchestra who had not done hardly any contemporary music, by creating a series based on the Pulitzer Prize.
Hmm.
And I put a Pulitzer Prize winner on every single concert from my first 3 years. And I would
A composer that won a Pulitzer Prize in music.
that's right.
Okay.
And all of them living, none of the ones that had
Fantastic.
passed. And we always had the reigning Pulitzer Prize winner come and be in residence with the orchestra, work with the orchestra, talk to the audience about how they compose their piece. And we've had, 10 or 12 Pulitzer Prize winners here over the course of my tenure. And the my idea behind that was, let's give them the best American music that we can.
Hmm.
Because at that point, when I first came, orchestras weren't playing contemporary music very much.
Hmm.
It was either a occasional barn burner like Short Ride in a Fast Machine,
Yeah.
and then maybe a smattering of more local composers. So people didn't really have a sense of what was actually being produced by these top shelf American composers. And that's not to say we didn't support local composers, because we've done that, we do that.
Right.
But
Yeah. I've
but
seen that in
but
here. Yeah.
but the thing is, like if once you start putting it in the mix, once you get over those first few bumps in the road where those people who do love the art form but know exactly what they want at a concert, overture, concerto, symphony, thank you very much, lots of conversations about that. But what I found was that I would be in conversation at receptions and things after concerts, and there's a group of people that I call husbands of wives who drag them to the symphony. And these guys, all they want to talk about is contemporary music,
Isn't that interesting?
because it sounds like a film score to them.
Yeah, of
It's
course.
it's their sound world. Beethoven is
Yeah.
stuffy, you
Right.
know, but
Right.
they're fascinated by the sound effects and this
Yeah.
kind of thing.
I love
So
that.
And just today I had this conversation with somebody in our boardroom just a couple hours ago. That if you're in a concert and you don't like something, first of all, wait 15 minutes. You're probably going to like the next piece.
Yeah.
But also realize that for the person sitting next to you, this may be the most important piece we play all night.
Mhm.
Like, don't assume that your taste is the same as other people's tastes or because of your familiarity.
Right.
So, and after a while, you start to build trusts, or at least it feels like trust. It could just be that all those people that don't want to hear any new music hate me so much that they never come anymore. But, but, but guess what? We replace them with people who do.
That's right.
Yeah.
We to that end, we have a member of the Ictus Institute who is a composer, and they ask this question. I'm just going to read it out. Have you had a project where trust with the composer was built instantly, and another where it completely failed? What was the biggest difference in the dynamics between those instances, and what was the gap caused by the composer being too rigid with their markings? And is that trust something a conductor can actually learn to build as they work with more people through their career over time? Or is it a personality clash? We have to embrace ourselves. Now, disclaimer: I've actually premiered a piece by this composer, so I'm a little nervous if I'm if I'm the issue. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on building of trust with a composer? Have you
Well,
premiered more than one piece by the same composer, like over time?
yeah, yeah, I have. Um, So first of all, composers are very grateful when you program their music. Let me just say it's a pretty easy gig, in terms of that. I mean, sometimes you'll get somebody who's so full of themselves, but that they can't see that it's actually a collaboration between themselves and the performer. But I haven't found that to be the case, really. Um, Conflicts with sometimes. I mean, there's we actually. So usually, the criticism of a conductor is that they don't take enough time for the new piece when
Okay,
rehearsing,
gotcha.
or they don't take enough time for the soloist. They're like it's all about the big piece on the concert, the
Yeah,
Rachmaninoff Second Symphony or whatever,
right, right.
because you're gonna dig in, you're gonna interpret it and whatnot. If anything, I've been criticized for the opposite.
Hmm.
Here, sometimes our players are like, I can't really wish you'd spend a little more time on that Rachmaninoff. Um, but um, but of course, you can never spend enough time for the composer.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
It's so I would say that the any tension that I've had with the composer was basically having to say to them, "This is all the time I have for you."
Do
Um,
you do you tell me about your thoughts of having the composer in the room for rehearsals?
oh, I want it all. I mean, if I could have Beethoven there, I would take it
That's
all.
exactly.
You know, yeah, yeah.
Well,
No,
maybe not
so
Beethoven, maybe Mozart, but
yeah, yeah. Can I get? He could be rather cantankerous.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
But I have them as often as I can get them, and I'm also very interactive
Mhm.
with the composer. Like I'm always asking them, is this what you have in mind? Do you want this articulation? Let's play it another way for you. Tell me if you like this better. Like we're constantly doing that. And we have such an open atmosphere with our orchestra. We played so much contemporary music that the musicians feel comfortable also asking the composer,
Oh, that's great.
questions. So, it's a collaboration. Yeah.
Do you find that there are ever or often rewrites that happen in the moment when the composer hears it? They're like, eh. Or do you ever suggest? I wonder if you should. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I do just make suggestions
Yeah,
because a lot of times composers don't actually know what's best,
yeah,
even with their own music, in terms of actually getting it to work with the orchestra. Tempos are a prime example, of what's in the composer's mind and what's actually
right.
achievable in that moment, that kind of thing. So, but and to your first point, I think there are oftentimes that the composer will make changes not notes so much, but articulations, dynamics.
Yeah.
It's occasionally I get frustrated with composers who, like, I can't tell you the amount of times where in a concerto and a new concerto where my assistant conductor will say, the orchestra's covering the soloist in this point, and the composer
Right.
would say, "Oh, that's okay. It's fine if the orchestra and I've said to the composer, like, you have any idea how frustrating it is for an audience to see the pianist slamming away and not be able to hear what they're playing? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, rewrite it if you don't
Why
care
did you
about the
bother
rhythm."
writing notes for that person?
Exactly. This is the point. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, we're almost out of time, but I I'm fascinated by where you sit in music history because you studied or were mentored by sort of the last group of conductors that were household names, if you think about it.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
and so and if Wikipedia is correct, this includes Leonard Bernstein, Kurt Masur, Eric Leinsdorf, Seiji Ozawa, Gustav Meyer, and Riccardo Muti. Is this right?
yeah, my daughter wrote that Wikipedia page, so yeah, that's right.
Good job. She did a good job. Okay, good. All right. So so I've named off these great conductors of the past, and I'm gonna name each one, and I want to do like a rapid fire question thing with you. Okay,
Mhm.
so I'm gonna name a conductor in just a few words. Define their artistic leadership style. Okay,
Mm.
so think back like in rehearsal, and I mean Bernstein has had movies made after him, and so they have certain reputations that are outside the podium, but really on the podium or even, and I don't want to define it too much,
Yeah.
but all right, so here we go. Okay, let's start with Leonard Bernstein.
Well, Bernstein was a big influence on me. Studied with him in master classes at Tanglewood. When I first moved to New York City, I went to his rehearsals for Mahler 2, Mahler 3, those recordings. So the relationship, the magnetism that he had was uncanny. In conversation, speaking in front of public, rehearsing the orchestra. His passion was infectious. His knowledge of the score is just unbelievable. Yeah.
So there was no eye rolling when he was up on the podium, being uber expressive and
No, no. I mean, everybody. By the time I got to him, everybody knew who Leonard Bernstein
sure.
was.
Okay.
So all the over the topness of him was, yeah, de rigueur, as we just said. Yeah.
Okay. Kurt Masur.
Wow. I experienced Kurt Masur as full of compassion. Talking about core to mission. Like, he, into the depths of his soul, not only understood the composer but communicated the composer. Not everybody experienced him this way because he had rough edges in front of the orchestra and even towards some of the assistant conductors that he had. I fortunately was not a recipient of that, but a man of deep conviction.
Hmm. Okay. Leinsdorf.
Uh, um,
That's going to be the clip that I'm going to use to promote this video.
Um, I mean, I went to seminars of his. I mean, we're talking early '80s here, both Interlochen and Tanglewood. Like, really considered himself to be the be all end all. Um, you know, like, of everything. I don't know, and I was very young and very impressionable, so I took him very seriously. And the older I got, the less seriously I take him. Enough said.
Okay. Well, we'll leave Maestro Eric to the side for now. Seiji Ozawa.
Maybe just the amazing technique, fluidity. I mean, it was like watching a dance. I sat at his feet at rehearsals with the BSO at Tanglewood summer after summer, and just, you know, I mean, when he was in his element with the right repertoire, like just amazing. Like the Stravinsky, the Berlioz. I mean, the Brahms maybe not so much, but um, and his memory, his mind, unbelievable. And I remember because my teacher was the head conducting coach at Tanglewood, Gustav Meyer, and
Mhm.
he said he was close with Seiji, and he said, people think that he's got this photographic memory because he conducted Messiaen's St. Francis 6 hours from memory, like this guy. But he said, no, he says, not true. Seiji is a workhorse. He has this,
Mm.
he gets up at 4 o'clock every morning. He studies until 10, until he goes into rehearsal. And like,
Wow.
that's like, he's just got this routine, and, but, even so, what an incredible mind. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, you brought him up, Gustav Meyer.
My father, you know,
Hmm.
like, just, full of integrity, very compassionate. He and Mazur kind of kindred spirits in this way. Um, he and it's hard for me to talk about him without getting choked up because yeah, I spent 2 or 3 years with him in Ann Arbor, but he remained a big part of my early career until he died, and an encourager. I remember visiting him up in Connecticut when he was conducting, and I had no work. I just had no work. My wife was supporting us, and we were living in Brooklyn, and he would say to me, he was still the conducting coach at Tanglewood, so he saw everybody because Tanglewood was the conducting program
Mm.
back then, and he would say to me, David, you have to stay with it. It has to work. I see everybody else. This has to work,
Ah.
and it just like he kept me going.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Um, I didn't realize this until today that you worked under Riccardo Muti at Philadelphia.
Worked under is maybe a little too strong.
Okay.
When I was finishing my master's in Ann Arbor, I wrote to 5 conductors and basically asked if I could come spend a year, um, you know, sitting in their rehearsals and learning. And all 5 of them said yes. All
Wow.
5 of them. We're talking to Charles Dutoit, Andre Previn,
Wow.
and but I was enamored of Muti, so I did spend a year in Muti's rehearsals in Philadelphia, and just like consummate knowledge of the score. The relationship he had with the Philharmonic was one of total respect. His management of rehearsal and times of rehearsal. I learned so much about rehearsal technique from him
Hmm.
that year. Interpretation, not so much.
Okay.
Depth, that I got that
Interesting.
from Azur,
Yeah. Yeah.
not from Muti so much, but like I say, it was more like an apprenticeship. He was
Yeah.
happy to have me there.
Yeah.
He was happy to talk to me,
That's
but
really cool.
he wasn't going to invest a lot. So
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So last question. 40 years from now, somebody is having a similar interview with somebody that you mentored. What do you hope they say about you?
That I helped them,
Hmm.
you know. I mean, I try to do that. Like I said, I don't teach conducting, but I would say the closest I come is our assistant conductors here. We've had 3 of them um, since I've been here, and they've all gone on. Chad Hutchinson is director of orchestras at Eastern Michigan University. Thomas Fortner is now living in Berlin, um, and is getting a nice start conducting. Nicholas Sharma was our last conductor, and now he's assistant with Toronto Symphony. So,
Oh,
they're moving on, and it's not. I don't teach them, but I try to lead by example, and I'm always available to answer questions and have a beer after rehearsal or something.
that's
Yeah,
where the best conversations happen anyway.
yeah,
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
Thank you, Maestro Geir, for your generosity and for your wisdom and for your work in South Dakota and around the world. We're grateful to have you among our leaders in this field.
Well,
We're grateful and for this time.
it's a privilege. It's absolutely a privilege to be able to work and make a living in this incredible art form. I thank God every day.
If you caught yourself geeking out over Maestro Geir's conducting advice like I was, that's the kind of work we do inside the Ictus Institute. It's a community for conductors focused on clarity, technique, and the real work of rehearsal. Join us to continue the conversation. The link's below.